Roughly 2 years ago, I began teaching myself Japanese. One of the things I immediately discovered was that good, concise info was hard to find. So I trudged along in my studies, gathering up all the best hacks and cheat codes and writing them down into my notebook, when I began thinking, maybe I should make my own beginner's guide lesson videos to pass on everything I've learned. When I made my first upload back in May 2015, believe it or not, I was only 3 months along in my learning journey. And in my novice haste to help others, I unfortunately made some crappy choices. Like, for example, placing time constraints on videos, which left a lot of people with more questions than answers. I also used the moving background, which many found disconcerting, so for those reasons I've decided to remake the first several videos in my series, removing eyesores and typos while expanding and updating the material to make it less vague and more comprehensible. In my first month of learning Japanese, I was banging my head against the wall because I'm not a football fan. What do I mean by that? Well, if you tried using football terminology to explain a simple idea to me, I would be lost. A simple idea, and I'd be lost because I don't recognize those terms. There are areas of fluency even within a singular language. If you're not an architect, you won't get very far making small talk at an architect convention. So that's why I'm going to make this as digestible as I possibly can. When I finally realized how easy this actually was, I showed one of my roommates how to use in 5 minutes what took me 3 weeks to fully decode because of overcomplicated explanations. After that, I showed 2 other people as an experiment to see how fast they could grasp the basic idea, and guess what? They all picked it up within 10 minutes. And so will you. So let's get to it. In Japanese, there are many ways to say the same thing. Meanings remain essentially unchanged, but levels of politeness are altered depending on your social situation, whether you're hanging out with friends or discussing work with your boss. Mas form is considered polite. There are 5 mas forms to know. Mas, which is pronounced mas, but spelled M-A-S-U, and that's because the Japanese phonetic character system contains consonants and vowels combined together. But when it's translated into the Roman alphabet form, known as Romaji, it sometimes contains artifacts of the Japanese writing system which may not always be colloquially pronounced. Such is the case with mas, which is pronounced similar to the green stuff that grows on rocks and trees. When you see a mas ending on a verb, all it means is that you do the verb, or that you will do the verb. So it can be both present and future tense depending on how it's used in conversation. Mashita. Mashita is past tense. When you see a verb with a mashita ending, it implies that something was done in the past. Masen. This is the negative. When a verb ends with masen, it means you don't do the verb, or also that you won't do the verb. Masen deshita. This is the past tense negative. Did not, verb. And lastly, masho. Let's do. That's as clear as I can possibly describe it. Now the next step is verbs. We all know what verbs are. They're action words. Eat, run, watch, play, etc., etc., etc. In Japanese, verbs are broken into 3 distinct groups. I'm going to go slightly out of order and start with group 2. These are known as ru verbs. In most instances, ru verbs are easy to identify because of their endings. If you have a verb that ends with either eru or iru, you simply drop the ru, the ru, and you add your mas ending. For example, miru, to see. Taberu, to eat. Now let's return to our mas form guide. If you want to say let's eat, how do you do it? Remember, all you have to do with verbs that end in eru or iru is simply drop the ru and then add your mas form ending. So let's eat would be what? Taberu minus ru plus masho, which is the let's do form, and then you would have tabemasho, let's eat. That's it. How do you say I saw? The verb is miru, which means to see. Does it end in eru or iru? Okay. So what did you do? You saw something. Past tense. Miru minus ru plus mashita, did do, this is our past tense, equals mimashita, saw. Or in this context, I saw. Now, wasn't that easy? One commonly used exception verb would be shiru, which is obviously got an IRU on the end, which means to know. This is the verb to know. There are a few other exception verbs to this trick, but only a small handful are commonly used, and they're easy to memorize. You can Google the very short list at any time. And those exception verbs conjugate just like Group 1 verbs that are not hard to understand either. So let's discuss how they work. Okay, Group 1, known as U verbs, or U, in the letter U to your English-speaking mind. How do they work? Any verbs that are not RU verbs, that is, verbs that end with ERU or IRU, are probably Group 1 verbs. So let's discuss how they work. Here are two examples. Nomu, to drink. Iku, to go. The important thing to know about U verbs is that the U hiragana is going to change to an I hiragana, and then you add your mas ending. That's it. That's all there is. See, this is really not rocket science. Okay, pop quiz time. How do you say, I don't drink? Nomu, that's the verb to drink, becomes nomi. You see how this works? Plus your negative mas form, masen. To become nomimasen. I don't drink. That's literally all there is to it. And because of the nature of the Japanese language, pronouns like I and you are often omitted. So you'll be surprised how far you can get just knowing like 20 verbs and how to conjugate them using mas form. Let's try another one. How do you say I didn't go? Remember, U changes to I and then add your mas ending. So let's try that second U verb, iku, which means to go. It becomes iki plus past tense negative masen deshita, which implies didn't do, and becomes ikimasen deshita, I didn't go. And a tip to expand your range in Japanese in an instant is just add ka to the end of any statement to make it a question. Ikimasen deshita, I didn't go. That's the statement. Ikimasen deshita ka? Didn't you go? Boom. Works with everything I've previously mentioned, and it also works with Group 3 verbs, which we'll now take a look at. Group 3 verbs are a very small group. There's only two. Suru, which means to do, and kuru, which means to come. Suru becomes shi, and kuru becomes ki. And then you add your mas form suffix. Real simple. This is a handy bit of info since suru verbs are everywhere. The reason for that being is because they can be formed by adding suru to the end of nouns. The verb itself as a standalone word means simply to do. As you progress in your Japanese study, you'll begin to learn that the Japanese use a lot of loan words, mostly from Chinese and also a lot from English, but also a few other Western languages. Suru is very versatile because it allows one to Japaneseify foreign words. There are many foreign word plus suru verbs which are recognized in Japanese dictionaries, so you're going to see it a lot. In which case, if you come across a verb like benkyou suru, which means to study, it conjugates like suru by itself, or any other suru verb. So here's an example. Benkyou suru, to study, will become benkyou shi, plus mashita, did do. Benkyou shimashita, studied, past tense, or I studied. And that's really all there is to it. With that, I hope that any part of this video has helped you in some way. And also I hope that this revised video clears up any confusion over my first mas video, and makes it easier to concentrate on the subject matter also without the rotating background. So now Google some verbs, express yourself, and have some fun. And as a final note, I recommend any learners of Japanese learn the hiragana alphabet. It may seem like a pain at first, but it's really not difficult, and it just makes the whole process way easier, especially when you start communicating with real Japanese folks. So just memorize it and get it out of the way.